Hello and welcome to the WhyKnox podcast brought to you by Visit Knoxville. My name is Jody Collins of Feral Giant and I'll be your host on this journey. What we'll be doing is interviewing different folks around Knoxville that make Knoxville the great place it is to live. We'll have staples that you see around town all the time, but we'll also have some lesser known folks, people behind the scenes that make this a great city. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you'd like to share the podcast on social media, be sure to tag us at Visit Knoxville and use the hashtag WhyKnox. Without much further ado, here's the episode.
My name is Becky Hancock. I'm the executive director of the Tennessee Theater in Knoxville.
Where are you originally from?
I am a South Knoxville girl.
Okay.
I grew up on Woodson Drive, which is just off Alcoa Highway.
Okay.
And went to Doyle High School, which is now known as South Doyle, but it's not the same thing.
And there's two schools across the street. Was the original one across the street a middle school?
Yes. So the middle school was on the left and the high school was on the right. And I went to both of those schools.
Okay. And did you go away to college or did you stay around town?
I went to UT. I wasn't quite ready at 18 to fly the nest totally. I did live on campus, but I did not leave. I wasn't ready to leave Knoxville. I was ready to leave Knoxville by the time I graduated, though.
Okay.
I was on the 6-year plan.
Nice.
I got a double major in music history and German. I spent a year abroad, so I was busy, but I was again not quite ready for the real world until 6 years of school. But then I went really big. I moved to New York City.
Okay.
Had never been there before my interview for a job. Had all these preconceptions about what it was like, that it was dirty and there were muggings on every corner and all that stuff. But I loved it. I was blown away by how wonderful the city was. So I moved there in the fall of 1994.
Okay.
And I worked in New York City for about 6 years.
Okay.
First job I had was a company or an organization called ASCAP, which you probably know about. It's a performance rights organization. They pay royalties to composers and songwriters and publishers.
I think Paul Williams was the president of that for a little while.
He may have been.
I don't. Musician Paul Williams.
Yeah.
Smokey and the Bandit. He's the little guy.
I worked in a department called the Serious Music Department, which is kind of funny because as if other people like the Beatles or Michael Jackson aren't serious about what they do, but it was the classical music department. So a lot of classical music is in the public domain, but not everything.
Is that why you majored in German and studied abroad in Germany?
I wanted to work in the fine arts.
Okay.
And I thought I wanted to be a teacher. Thought I wanted to be a musicologist. But then I decided I did not want to stay in school until I was 30 or longer.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to publish. I really loved teaching, but I didn't love writing necessarily, not academic writing.
Okay.
And so I was done with school after my bachelor's.
Okay.
And so I ended up just moving to the city and working in the arts. And that first job was a great first job to have because it was, no commitment after 5 p.m. And I figured out how to be an adult in the big city and pay my bills and, organize a home and all that. And then I worked for a PR firm.
Okay.
That represented all classical musicians. So pianists, conductors, singers, music festivals, things like that. So it was really narrow, but it was a great place to do it in New York. I got to go to Carnegie Hall all the time. I got to go to Lincoln Center. My roommate at the time was a pianist for the Metropolitan Opera, so I went to the opera all the time. So as a musician and a arts enthusiast, it was a great place to be.
Awesome.
And but it was really expensive, and it was really far away from home. And the longer that I lived there, the more attractive home seemed, and my family and all that. So after about 5 years, I was ready to leave, and I started looking around for jobs. Okay. And I knew this man in Knoxville named Ashley Capps.
I think I've heard of him.
Yep. Yeah. And I had known him when I worked at WUOT as a college student here in Knoxville. Okay. I worked there as an announcer. So he had a program called Unhinged. And so I knew Ashley through that, and I knew he did something in music, but I wasn't really sure what it was. So I called him and said, hey, I'm thinking about moving back to the South. I know you work in music. Can I work for you in some capacity? And he said, well, I need a theater manager. And I'd never managed a theater before, but I thought, well, that sounds good. So I moved back to Knoxville in December of 2000.
Okay, so that was before all the reconstruction was going on? Okay.
Yes. So started my job in January of 2001.
Okay.
And hit the ground running. Yeah. I mean, theater was busy then, not as busy as it is now, but it was pretty busy.
Yeah.
And there was a lot going on, a lot of big shows.
And movies.
Concerts, movies.
Midnight movie. I remember coming and seeing The Godfather and Pink Floyd The Wall for midnight movies in either the late 90s or early 2000s. Yeah.
Mostly in the summertime, we show classic film.
Yeah.
But the symphony was here, the opera was here. What I really loved, the idea about the job was that it appealed to all my music tastes and not just classical music, which I did love, but I loved other kinds of music too. And then I fell in love with this building.
Oh yeah.
And had been here as a kid, you know, as a high schooler and as a college student. I came here a lot, but working here really just got me into the walls and into the spirit of this place, and I just fell in love with it. And so when I started here as general manager, the board was already thinking about the project and the renovation, but it was they'd been thinking about it for a long time, doing some background around it, but they started raising money and then of course closed for renovations in 2003. Yeah. And then reopened in 2005.
And I'm trying to remember, I remember coming to movies or coming to shows, and the archway, you would see progressively the paint would start to get more and more every time I showed up. It was like, oh, they've made it up to that part. Okay, cool.
Back in September of 2001, we had some specialists come in and paint a section along the side of the proscenium to show people what the paint was supposed to look like. Yeah. Here it is after, 75, 80 years of dirt and dust and cigarette smoke and coal and pollution. And here's what it's supposed to look like. So we did paint this one section that fall to show people what it was going to look like.
Yeah, it was crazy. Especially bringing people here who had never been here before. And they're like, why is it just that? I was like, well, they've painted this section. That's unpainted. And it was night and day.
People thought we had a light on it because it was so bright. It's like, no, that's just paint. That's modern paint, but it's recreating the original colors of the theater.
So getting into classical music, where did that come from? Were your parents in it? What did your parents do for a living?
Well, I get all of my musical talent and interest, I think, from my father and my grandmother. My grandmother was my first piano teacher. I started when I was about 4 or 5 with her. She was quite an elderly grandmother, so pretty old. So I only studied with her for a couple of years. And then I switched to a neighborhood piano teacher. So music was always playing in the house. My dad loved, he had a record player, and he loved Chet Atkins, and he loved Karen Carpenter. So I listened to a bunch of great music as a kid. And my mom doesn't really have any musical talent per se, but she understood the importance of music. And so she would buy those Time Life classics, those LPs, and play those for us. I remember listening to Peter and the Wolf on record. She lived in Central America for a while, so she had some Spanish music and some really interesting music. So my father was self-employed. He was he was a fuel oil distributor. So companies and residences that used fuel oil for heating, he was a one-man shop, drove a truck and delivered fuel oil to people. And then my mom was mostly a homemaker. She was a substitute teacher sometimes, and then sometimes for a short period later in my childhood, she was the church secretary. But I've always kind of thought of her as just a homemaker, making home when I'm home from school and making great dinners and stuff like that.
Brothers and sisters.
I have an older brother who's
Is he into music, or
he's a big music fan.
Okay.
He's a big music fan. He's actually coming to the Pixies show here next month.
That's a good one.
And then my younger brother, he's 3 years younger. We're kind of spaced apart. He's a Very, very talented musician.
Okay.
He played, his name is Tom Pryor.
Oh,
My older
yeah.
brother's name is Jim.
Okay.
But Tom,
I've seen Tom many a time.
Played for many years in the Black Lilies. He was one of the founding members, and he also played in a band called Nug Jug. He played in a band called, oh shoot, now I can't remember the name of it. It's a bluegrass band. He's really, really talented player.
I still remember there was a guy I worked with at Pet Safe that saw them at Foothills Fall Festival, and he immediately texted me. He was like, I don't know who that guitar player was. He can play for Leonard Skinner. Like, he's good. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's Tom. And he was like, all right, I want to send him a message. I was like, well, find him on Facebook. It's fine, dude. And he sent him a message. He's like, man, you were amazing. Like, he just kind of.
Tom's a great, great player. Yeah. So he left the Black Lilies about 3 years ago and got tired of touring. I think it's a hard life. People think it's glamorous, but it's not.
Oh, yeah.
And so he has sort of relocated to Taos, New Mexico.
Okay.
A very small community. It's only about 7,000 people there in Taos, but he and his fiance, Marissa Ireland, are living there, and they bought a condo, and I don't, that's where they are now. Maybe
it's a good place to visit.
It is a beautiful place, very spiritual place. And he's a really big fish in a really small pond. So he gets to play a lot around town, and
awesome.
Doesn't have to travel. They get to do fun things on the weekends. Yeah. They enjoy the outdoors. So he's in a good spot.
Yeah, good weather year round.
Beautiful place.
So they got the music too. So you all in the family.
Everybody appreciates music and understands, what a gift it is. You
came here and did you kind of help spearhead the renovation, or were there already people kind of working on the renovation at that point?
Yeah, my role was not to spearhead for sure. And a lot of people sometimes try to give me that credit, and that I certainly am not.
I'm going to cut out everything that says you're not
no,
spearheading.
It's okay. But no, there was a board of directors led by Bruce Hartman.
Oh.
And then a couple of other key people like Bill Snyder, Wallace Bowman, some other board members, Jenny Hines, who really had the drive, the impetus to save this theater. Of course, the man who saved it back in 1981, James Dick, we really have him to thank for the theater still being here. My role as general manager was more during the planning process, was to help the board and the design team, along with the technical director who's been here for almost 40 years now. The two of us worked with them to make sure that the building, the way that the spaces were programmed was going to work after everybody else walked away, right?
Right.
So we worked really closely with the design team to, how many dressing rooms do we need to have, and how big does the stage need to be, and what does the front box office need to look like, and all that sort of operational stuff,
And ways to improve, like processor flow or weight management for bands.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the technical stuff was handled by Tim Burns, the technical director here. And then I was really more focused with front of house stuff. And so I was part of the team, but I wasn't on the front lines. I wasn't fundraising for the organization. I wasn't making decisions. I was just one of the team members.
Okay. During that period also, you have local legends, I don't know what you call it, but like local company gone big, Regal Cinema, and who has also recently moved downtown. So they were a partner, support system at that point?
Yeah, one of their executives, Greg Dunn, served on the board from the opening year back in 1996. And Greg grew up in the movie business. His father was a movie theater operator, and so Greg just always loved being involved in theaters, and especially these old, beautiful movie theaters like the Tennessee.
Yeah.
So when there were plans afoot to restore the theater, he wanted to be part of it. And not only was Greg part of it, but he always made sure that Regal as a corporation was involved. And so Regal has been very, very generous to us in terms of financial support every year, technical support. A lot of our equipment, there's not a lot of people around who know how to use it anymore. And so they help us with repairs. They have donated equipment to us. So
they switched over to the digital film projector.
That's right. We still have 35 millimeter projectors, which we use occasionally.
Okay.
But we prefer the digital experience as most patrons do as well. So they donated a DCP projector to us about 5 years ago.
I was here for the opening, the Back to the Future, and it looked insane.
It was so much
crisp.
Fun. Yeah.
And so, I still have it in my heart, all those films seen like 7 Year Itch. There was a double bill of 7 Year Itch and Some Like It Hot.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny because everybody came for Some Like It Hot. Nobody stayed for 7 Year Itch, and the print on it was bad.
Was bad. Yeah.
It was just funny. It was like, okay, I've seen this before, but this is still awesome seeing this up on, like, so it's weird. You want to keep with the old, but it's good to also have the new in tandem. I guess
that's right.
The best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the 35 millimeter now is that the film studios are not producing new prints, new copies, and so the ones that are rented and passed around the country, they're pretty dogged. They're not in great shape, and people have, pretty high expectations of sound and picture quality because of your home theater setups now, and so we felt that it was responsible to present the best quality product that we could, but those projectors are about $75,000. So it was not a small thing for them to give us that projector. And so we use that most of the time now. There are occasions where we still show 35 millimeter. And
it's also great giving a shout out or coming back around to another local great company, AC Entertainment, they book all of the music here, or all of the, don't call it rock, non-classical music, essentially.
Yes. So they have a wonderful long partnership with the theater. When the theater was transferred in ownership from a private entity to a nonprofit organization.
And that was 96?
96.
Okay.
The board of directors, when they were formed, they were really wanting to focus on how do we preserve this theater? How do we make it work for the future? They weren't really interested in operating the building on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
And so Ashley Capps of AC Entertainment, he stepped up and said, I want to do it. Let me help you. Let me help you not only run the theater on a day-to-day basis, but let me help you book the theater. And he was, that was 25 years ago, or my math skills are fuzzy, but it was a long time ago. But even then he had great connections in the music business around the country.
Right.
And so he was a promoter at the time, and used those connections as a promoter with the artist agents and the booking agents and the management companies of the artists in Nashville and in New York and LA to bring those shows to the Tennessee.
Right.
So the shows have always been presented by the theater.
Right.
So this is an important distinction.
Right.
The theater pays for the shows. When the shows earn money, the theater earns money. When the shows don't do well, then that's the theater's hit.
Okay.
That's the way that it's set up. But the theater then pays AC Entertainment for their services and their expertise to bring the shows to the theater. And
you all also have partnerships with KSO and Knoxville Opera in bringing those shows to life.
Right. So they are rental clients.
Okay.
And they have rented the theater for their presentations for many, many years.
Yeah.
The symphony and the opera began in the mid-'80s playing here before the renovation, before the building was really properly set up for a large orchestra or a full opera company. But we think of them as sort of an anchor tenant. The local live performing arts groups, and more recently we can add to that the Knoxville Jazz Orchestra. Those three nonprofit performing arts groups will rent the theater and present their own programs to the general public here in this venue. And this is, speaking of rental, I've noticed this has become more of a destination for wedding photographs and it's funny because we actually do very few weddings now. But we do more photography. Yeah. And it's just really because so many brides and families planning weddings, they want to book, a year out, 18 months out, 2 years out. And honestly, we just have the potential to earn a lot more income on a concert than a wedding for 200 people. Yeah. It's just the economics of it. And so we have to make decisions based on what's the best financial decision for the theater, because our number one responsibility is to take care of the building. And so that means earning money to take care of it. So we don't book a lot of weddings now because of the lead time, but we do occasionally have bridal portraits or engagement portraits. And of course you see people taking photos outside on Gay Street all the time with a big vertical sign in the background. Yeah, I'm not, even though this podcast is a little evergreen,
was driving through downtown the other night when it was really cold and saw a young woman in a small dress to where I was like, I wear shorts in the wintertime, so it's fine. But I almost yelled, "Oh, that's a winter dress. I wear winter shorts," and she's wearing a winter dress. But it was like, it's too cold out here for you. You put on some pants, put on some clothes.
But she was getting her photo made.
She was getting her phone with the Tennessee Theater sign in the background. Oh,
happens all the time. I would love to put a time lapse camera somewhere on the corner and just see how many people
the selfies,
take their picture in front of that sign. It's a great icon.
Oh yeah. And I think a lot of the brides want their photos made here because of how well everything looks. Like the chandeliers and everything is just gold and red and beautiful. So through the renovation, how many years did you say you all were closed? 3 years?
Well, it's interesting that you say that. Yes, people are attracted to the beauty of the sign and the beauty of the interior, but it didn't always look that way. And we talked about that a little earlier with the repainting of the proscenium arch. But
because even the sign was redone in the last couple of years.
So the building opened in 1928. It was a movie theater.
Right.
There was always live entertainment. There was always a stage, but it was really meant for small, simple vaudeville type acts, and not for a full scale production of any sort. But by the 1980s, that's how the building was being used for symphony, for opera, they even tried to do some touring Broadway, and it just physically couldn't fit in the building. And the stage is 2 stories above the street on the rear side of the building, so you couldn't get to the stage very easily. So the renovation that happened solved all those problems, and it restored the beauty of the theater from the 1928. So sort of the best of both worlds. Everything in front of the curtain that the public gets to enjoy was restored back to its original beauty with some modern amenities like an elevator and additional bathrooms and a better concession service point. And then everything behind the curtain was brought up to 21st century technical standards. What do shows that are touring around the country, what do they need?
Like sound and light and
space. So we demolished the old stage house entirely and built a new stage house and attached it to the old building essentially. And so the new stage house is deeper. It hangs out over State Street. It's almost twice as deep as the old stage.
Oh, wow.
And then the dressing room area, and you and I are actually sitting in a dressing room right now. This space was commercial space that was built in 1928, but it was a insurance office or optometrist, whatever. So the theater purchased this space back in 1996. And then, we purchased it back in 2002 or so. And then it was turned into our dressing room suite in 2005. So the theater was closed for 19 months, almost 2 years. And it was about a $30 million renovation project. So it was significant. And I think a lot of people, especially because that's now, 14 years ago, a lot of people don't really realize how massive a project it was. And how necessary it was to make sure that this theater was going to be functional well into the 21st century.
And you all have also purchased the building next door? Is that...
So there was a portion of a building for sale. It's technically a condominium building. And so we purchased 80% of the building in the form of 4 condos. Now, a lot of people, when they hear the word condo, they think of a residential unit. But a condominium really just means a division or a portion of a building that you own outright. And so we own outright about 80% of the building. There are 2 other tenants in the building that own their own condo spaces. So we just purchased that. In fact, it was a month ago today, was the closing. And so our goal last year was to figure out how to raise the money and to secure the space because it was on the open market. Now that we own it, we're going to slow down and figure out what to do with it. We have some ideas. We want to try to address some of the crowding issues for the bathrooms and for the concessions. We want to think about how we might be able to cater to modern needs. In other words, now the symphony, the opera, the Broadway shows that we do, there's often the need for a pre-show separate reception.
Right, and even like when Ken Burns came to town, there was the VIP,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the theater wasn't designed to have that kind of
Right.
segmented
Right.
use. And so we feel that that building could help us do some of that.
Right.
But we have a lot of questions to answer. We don't really know exactly how it's going to all flesh out. So I can't really tell you more than that.
Wait
and it's
and see.
not that I'm keeping secrets
No.
from you. I really don't know myself. So we're going to learn all that next. And then maybe you can have me come back and I'll tell you more the next time.
Okay, so do you get out of the building much at all?
It's funny you say that because I had dinner with some friends a few weeks ago. An old high school friend of mine, in fact, he was my senior prom date, had been living in Seattle for decades, and they moved back to Knoxville.
Okay.
And we were talking about the theater because all I talk about is the theater all the time. And he looked at me and he said, "What do you do for fun?" And I said, well, I'm an introvert, actually.
Okay.
And so one of my favorite things to do is to have small groups over for dinner.
Okay.
So 6 people, 8 people.
Right.
That's my sweet spot. I love to connect with small groups of people.
Right.
I do often talk on the stage, to 1,500 people, but that's authentic, but it's not real vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I can do that. But I really prefer to connect with people one-on-one. So I love to cook.
Okay.
I love to travel. My husband and I love to travel. We don't get to do it real often, but when we do, we enjoy it.
Yeah.
I continue to sing privately.
Okay.
My husband is an amateur musician, guitarist, and so we get together with friends and just sing and play, cover songs and stuff like that. But that is something that's just for me.
Right.
I don't really do it publicly like my younger brother does. But and I live in an old house, and so in Old North Knoxville. So my husband Steve and I enjoy working on the house, and he said, "Well, it's a good thing because we'll never be done with it."
That's
houses.
home ownership.
Yeah, it's true. But we like living close to downtown, and
so do you go out now that the restaurant scene and everything is burgeoning so much here? Do you go out and try? Are you do you like to go out and try the new thing?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself an early adopter.
Right.
I'm not there on opening night. I'm not there for friends and family. I'm not like right there at the beginning. I'll kind of let the restaurant make it splash, and then maybe a month or two later I'll go and
work out the kinks.
And just I don't necessarily have to be the first, or I don't necessarily go to some of the I would love to go to more of those sort of curated dinners and all that, but I don't go to a lot of those. But I do love to bring guests visiting from out of town, bring them downtown, go out to eat. Of course, always show them the theater or other fun things. I do have the key. Yes, there's that advantage.
So what are some of your like favorite restaurants? Are there newer ones or old standbys?
Well, I would say my favorite restaurant downtown is probably Amelia.
Okay.
I really like Amelia a lot. I've had wonderful meals at J.C. Holdway. I've had wonderful meals at Oliver Royale. Those are probably my top 3 in terms of a really nice dinner out.
Yeah.
I also love to go to Kaizen. My senior prom date that I mentioned a minute ago, we were at Kaizen.
Nice.
That's
a good intimate place.
Yep. Very intimate. Yeah. You can't get a lot of people in there.
Yeah.
I am not much of a beer drinker, but I do like to go. Probably my favorite little bar downtown would be the Speakeasy. What's it called?
Peter Kern.
Yes, the Peter Kern Library.
Yeah.
With the secret entrance in the back. That's a great little feature.
That's a good thing to take out of town people too.
Yeah,
I love that you can be like, no, just follow me me down this alley.
Steve and I, we used to go to the Public House every Friday night. He works out of town, and so he would come home on Fridays with me to Public House.
Yeah.
That pattern has sort of fallen off. We go to Adopo sometimes.
Okay.
Living in Old North, there's a lot of great little spots around Old North.
Yeah.
Wild Love Bakehouse. Sorry about that.
The newly moved, I can't talk about food without talking about Jackie's Dream. Now that it's just across from Fulham.
Much closer to me than before. Another favorite place that I often go with my parents is Rankin Restaurant.
Oh yeah.
Now the oldest restaurant in Knoxville since Riga's closed.
That's crazy.
But love Rankin. They have the best biscuits in town by far. Best biscuits. So yeah,
you're throwing down. You're like, it's the best biscuits in town.
I challenge anybody to. I mean, Matt Robbs, he makes some good biscuits too. But to me, I think the Rankin biscuit, it reminds me most of the biscuits that my grandmother used to make. They're very traditional, really good.
Did you see when Alton Brown came here years ago for Biscuit Fest? Did you see his talk on his grandmother's biscuits?
I did not.
It was fascinating.
Was it?
I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going. I don't know that you can see it again, but he talked about how he tried to remake her biscuits, and he finally realized that the arthritis in her hands caused her to knead it a certain way, and that's what the trick. Spoiler alert. I love doing spoiler alert after I say the spoiler. So, but it was a really interesting talk hearing that about how he just couldn't crack the code, and that's him like figuring out the math behind it.
I also love to cook or use Cruise Farm buttermilk. I make pancakes and I make cornbread at home. Yeah, and those are my two favorite things to make with Cruise Farm.
Okay. So we've talked about changes in the theater. What do you think about the changes that happened? See, because if you grew up here and you saw, bars on the windows in the 80s and a little bit of roughness and how we've turned around, and now it's just such a walkable downtown and everything just seems to be blossoming.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was in college, the old city was having its first resurgence. Speaking
of Ashley and Ella Guru's.
Right. I went to Ella Guru's many times. I spent a lot of time at Annie's, later known as Lucille's.
Yeah.
But downtown, other than the theater, I came to the Symphony and I came to the Opera Summit at the theater, and then I came to the Bijou a little bit to see people like Bobby McFerrin and George Winston, Michael Hedges.
Mm-hmm.
But that was about it. There was not a whole lot going on. And even when I left in 1994, there was not a lot going on downtown. Right. So coming back in the year 2000 and then the 18 plus years since, 19 years, it's incredible to see how much the city has changed. And what I love about it is that it's relatively organic in the way that it has developed. It's not as if one thing happened that made downtown successful.
Right.
There was a lot of spurts and starts and stops, and but Market Square is now pretty much fully occupied. Pretty much all the shops on Gay Street, all the storefronts, maybe but one or two, are occupied.
And if one goes away, something immediately scoops
and
in.
It was not any one person's vision. There were a lot of different developers. There were a lot of restaurateurs who, stuck their neck out. I think the theater had a big role in that, in terms of a nonprofit that said, we're going to invest $30 million in this old building downtown because we believe in downtown. So yeah, it's wonderful. And I think, being a Knoxville native, as I said earlier, I didn't really appreciate my hometown until I left. But now I just don't know if I'd want to live anywhere else.
Do you have any idea on what you think the future might hold for the city? Something growth, some next big thing?
That's probably one of those questions where I have my head a little too buried in the theater to think a little bit bigger. But I feel like if we continue, I think there's obviously a great opportunity with, Madeline Rojero's done a great job as mayor, and the two previous mayors all had great visions for downtown. So I think it's exciting to think about new leadership in the mayor's office and who's coming next and what could happen there. The same thing with the county mayor, and just I think making sure that the city leadership is thinking about not just downtown but all of Knoxville and how the city can work together in all of its different neighborhoods and communities. And I think Knoxville, as a collective consciousness, we're finally proud of ourselves and who we are. And we're not trying to be another city. We're not trying to be another place. We are. We're owning who we are, and we're proud of that.
Right.
Warts and all.
That's an odd thing to talk to people not from here or from the state when they're like, oh, I know Tennessee. I've been to Memphis. I was like, Tennessee is four different major cities and then 50, in the middle all around that are their own. Everyone is their own voice.
Very different.
Right.
And when I lived in Germany, some of the elder generation people, the only thing they knew about Tennessee was Elvis.
Yeah.
And they said, do you know Elvis? I was like, well, I didn't know him personally, but I know who he is. But you're right. Or even the way that Nashville casts such a big shadow nationally and internationally. And Nashville's a great city, but it is not Knoxville.
No.
And Knoxville's not Chattanooga. Knoxville's not Bristol. Knoxville is not Newport. And so all of Tennessee, I do think the state does a really good job of through the tourism department to really talk about all the different parts of Tennessee and what makes Memphis great, what makes Knoxville great, etc. But no, they're very different. All three parts of the state are very different from one another.
And you all do a podcast. What is your all's podcast about?
Well, I stand in the lobby and I have a little name tag on so people know that I work here, and they love to walk up to me and just start telling me these stories. My mother used to come here, as a kid and met my father. They had their first date here. Or I used to come here in the 60s and watch movies and get in free for a bag of potato chips. Or I used to work here as an usher. Or, just whatever the stories. They're really personal and they're very passionate about sharing those stories with us. So my colleague Lila and I, we sat down and we said, we need to capture these stories. We need to share them with people. We need to archive them for our own posterity. So we started a podcast called Behind the Tennessee, a Palace of Stories.
Okay, nice.
And so it's a little bit of a two-part kind of thing. It is not only sharing stories and memories of people who are just the general public who may have come here as a patron, but then we're also digging into some of the little known facts about the theater, how the Wurlitzer works,
historic performances,
historic things. We've just started, so we've had 2 episodes, and the third one's getting ready to be released in very soon. So we're just starting, but we just thought it'd be a great way to communicate not only some of the little known facts about the theater, but also just sharing that passion that so many people have. I mean, it happened to me this weekend when we had Broadway in the building. A woman walked up to me and just started telling me this story about her mother coming here. And, the people are really, they feel like they own this place. And I mean that I'm perfectly happy to share the ownership with all of the community. Yeah. And again, the theater, not all the stories are happy. Some of them are challenging and poignant. But we're committed to telling the whole story of the Tennessee Theater. And so this podcast is a great way for us to do that.
And they can find it by searching.
Yep. It's on iTunes. It's on Spotify. We also have a website page, TennesseeTheater.com/podcast.
Okay.
And so you can get the episodes there. You can sign up to be notified when we drop a new episode.
Okay.
Or you can get it wherever you download your...
And search for Inside the Tennessee.
Behind the
Tennessee,
a Palace of Stories.
Okay. You mentioned the website, but where can people find you online? Where can they find out about shows or follow you on social media or email?
Yeah, we're pretty active on social media, especially Facebook and Instagram. We do have a Twitter account as well. And both Instagram and Twitter are TN Theater. Our website is TennesseeTheater.com. And because the theater was spelled the British way, R-E, on opening day in 1928, that's the way that we spell it. So be sure you spell it properly so you don't go to the wrong website. I also want to encourage your listeners to be careful about buying tickets online. Make sure that you're buying at the legitimate sites and that you're not paying too much.
On that note, when is the box office open?
Box office is open Monday through Friday, 10 to 5, and Saturdays, 10 to 2.
If you've not been here before, it's on the side of the building.
Yes.
But there is a sign.
Mm-hmm. If you are standing on the front there at Gay Street, just look to the left, walk down the hill, down Clinch Avenue, about halfway down the block. Halfway down the block, and there's a sign that sticks off the building. But you can stop by, buy a ticket. You can buy a ticket on the phone, or you can buy online if you need to buy something on a Sunday morning. Yeah. But just be sure that you're shopping through our website and not through another third-party site. because there's a lot of people out there selling tickets for jacked up prices.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.